The darkness was relentless, cloaking everything in its eerie embrace. In this murky abyss, a man named Jonathan struggled to find solace. No matter where he went or what he did, an unsettling presence loomed over him. He could only see the world in shades of black and gray, devoid of color and life. But it was the dark silhouette figures that haunted his existence, shadowy apparitions that seemed to manifest from the corners of his mind. It began innocently enough, with fleeting glimpses of faceless forms. Jonathan would catch them out of the corner of his eye, their ominous shapes twisting and contorting as they moved closer, only to dissipate into nothingness when he turned around to face them. At first he dismissed them as figments of his imagination, the product of an overactive mind in the depths of night. Yet their presence grew more persistent, invading his waking hours and tormenting his dreams. The silhouettes materialized in the mundane moments of his life, standing ominously at the edge of his peripheral vision. They never spoke, made a sound, but their mere existence seemed to whisper malevolence into his soul. Their sight alone was enough to send chills down his spine. As time went on, Jonathan's psychological state deteriorated. Sleep eluded him, replaced by restless nights filled with disconcerting visions. The figures multiplied, forming a sinister crowd that followed him wherever he went. The sensation of being watched consumed him, driving him to the edge of madness. Desperate to escape the clutches of these haunting specters, Jonathan sought answers. He delved into the ancient folklore, obscure occult texts, and online forums dedicated to the paranormal. One theory stood out among the rest, a concept known as the shadows of the damned. According to that legend, those cursed with the ability to see these dark entities were marked for a harrowing fate. The shadows were said to be the lost souls of murderers and malevolent spirits forever condemned to roam this earthly plane. Jonathan's mind swirled with dread, contemplating whether he had unwittingly stumbled upon a dark secret. The idea of these shadows being malicious entities intent on tormenting him began to consume his thoughts. In a desperate act of self-preservation, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Armed with newfound resolve, Jonathan ventured into the night, searching for the perfect opportunity to confront the shadows. He roamed the desolate streets, his heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and anticipation. And then, as if the universe had conspired to fulfill his morbid desire, he found himself face to face with one of the shadowy figures. His pulse quickened, adrenaline surging through his veins. Years of pent-up frustration and fear coalesced into a single moment of reckoning. Without hesitation, Jonathan lunged at the silhouette, his hands grasping for its formless body. He squeezed with all his might, fueled by a surge of primal rage. But as the figure collapsed under his grip, he felt a shudder of horror pass through him. The darkness dissipated, revealing not a malevolent spirit, but a lifeless body. A person, an innocent victim forever silenced by Jonathan's desperate madness. Jonathan's mind shattered, unable to comprehend the horrifying truth. He had become the monster he desperately sought to eradicate. The weight of his guilt bore down upon him, driving him to the edge of sanity. In the days that followed, the shadows ceased to haunt Jonathan. They no longer appeared to him as if they had completed their macabre purpose. The darkness that once enveloped this world has been replaced by an overwhelming sense of emptiness, a void that echoed within the echoes of his actions. Haunted by the consequences of his desperate act, Jonathan retreated from the world plagued by guilt and remorse. The shadows that had once consumed him were replaced by the shadows of his own guilt, forever etched into his conscience. And so the man who once only saw darkness was consumed by it, forever trapped in the inescapable depths of his own personal hell. In the small town of Crestwood, there lived a man named Jacob. He had a beautiful wife named Emily and two lovely children, Ethan and Lily. Jacob had a successful career, a picturesque home, and a seemingly perfect life. However, his reality was about to be shattered in the most horrifying way. One fateful day, Jacob embarked on his regular routine, leaving his family behind as he headed to work. He waved goodbye, promising to return home as soon as the clock struck 5. But little did he know those simple gestures of affection would soon become mere figments of his imagination. As Jacob went about his day, an unexpected accident occurred. He was involved in a severe car crash, leaving him with a traumatic brain injury. The impact of the accident was so severe that it plunged Jacob deep into a coma for an entire month. During that time, his mind played tricks on him, crafting a parallel existence where his wife, children, and successful life were all fabricated illusions. The day that Jacob finally regained consciousness, he awoke in a sterile hospital room. Confused and disoriented, he called out for Emily and his children, only to be met with puzzled glances from doctors and nurses attending to him. It was then he had realized something was horribly wrong. Frantically, Jacob demanded to know where his family was, but the medical staff could only offer bewildered expressions. The truth began to dawn on him. His life with Emily, Ethan, and Lily had been nothing more than an elaborate hallucination, a twisted dream woven by his own damaged mind. Desperate to uncover the truth, Jacob ventured back to Crestwood, hoping to find any trace of his family or evidence of the life that he had believed to be real. Determined to find answers, Jacob delved into his medical records, discovering that the accident had indeed caused him to slip into a month-long coma. Medical experts explained that his brain, in an attempt to protect itself from the trauma, had fabricated an alternate reality to shield him from the harsh truth. Haunted by the memories of the life he had lost, Jacob sank into despair. Everywhere he turned, he saw glimpses of his wife's smile, heard the laughter of his children, and felt the warmth of their love, only to have it cruelly snatched away. The knowledge that he had lost a decade of his life sent shivers down his spine. As the days turned into sleepless nights, Jacob had become a mere shell of his former self. He sought solace in the online world, sharing his harrowing story on forums and seeking guidance from those who might understand. But the responses he received were mixed. Some offered condolences, while others dismissed his claims as the ramblings of a broken man. Unable to accept the truth, Jacob began to question his own sanity. The lines between the hallucinations and reality blurred, and he could no longer discern fact from fiction. Every moment he spent alone was plagued by the phantoms of his imagined family tormenting him with their ethereal presence. The guilt of failing his family consumed him, and the loneliness gnawed at his soul. He became a recluse, trapped in a world that refused to acknowledge his suffering. Deep in the heart of a dense, desolate forest stood an old-style cabin, its wooden walls weathered by many years of neglect. It was the home of a solitary woman, Sarah, who sought solace in the tranquility of her secluded surroundings. Miles away from the nearest town, she cherished the isolation, relishing in the silence and peace that only the wilderness could offer. However, Sarah's peaceful existence began to unravel when inexplicable events started to plague her home. Strange sounds echoed through the cabin at night. A whisper here, a creaking there. Objects moved on their own accord, defying the laws of physics. Shadows danced and twisted, casting eerie shapes against the walls. The air was heavy with an unseen presence, and a sense of foreboding hung in every corner. One day, while going about her routine cleaning, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden door in the basement. It was concealed behind a dusty old bookshelf, covered in cobwebs and forgotten memories. With trembling hands, she pried the door open, revealing a hidden chamber that hadn't seen the light of day in decades. Curiosity overpowered her fear as she ventured into the dimly lit room. The air was stale, carrying the scent of decay and mystery. In the midst of the room, a lone table stood, adorned with an ancient book. Its weathered leather cover bore strange symbols of witchcraft and forgotten rituals. Drawn to the book, Sarah reached out and ran her fingers along its worn spine. The pages crinkled under her touch, as if whispering secrets only she could hear. She hesitated for a moment, then with trembling hands she opened the book. As she read the faded ink on the fragile pages, she discovered the book was chronicled the tale of the man in the walls, a being of darkness that had haunted these very woods for centuries. The stories were vague, shrouded in mystery, but they spoke of a malevolent presence that dwelled within the very fabric of the cabin. The man in the walls was said to feed on the souls of the living, trapping them within the confines of the cabin's time-worn structure. Fear coursed through Sarah's veins as she closed the book, realizing the gravity of her discovery. Unbeknownst to her, the presence she had felt all along was not a mere haunting, but a malefic force seeking to claim her soul. The days turned into nights, and Sarah's paranoia grew. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker. She felt eyes upon her, unseen and relenting. Sleep became elusive as the specter of the man in the walls haunted her dreams, promising an eternity of torment. One fateful night, as the moon hung high in the sky, Sarah stood alone in the cabin's dimly lit hallway. The walls seemed to breathe as if pulsating with a sinister energy. Desperation filled her heart as she pleaded for release from the horrors that plagued her existence. And then, with a bone-chilling whisper, the walls answered her call. The very fabric of the cabin seemed to warp and twist, contorting into grotesque shapes. The man in the walls emerged, a dark silhouette with piercing eyes that glowed like dying embers. It reached out, tendrils of darkness snaking towards Sarah, ensnaring her in an inescapable grip. She screamed, her voice drowned by the unholy laughter of the entity. The walls closed in around her, melding with her flesh and bones. Her soul became one with the haunted cabin, forever trapped in a prison of her own making. Once upon a time, in the darkest corners of the internet, a story began to circulate. It was a tale of someone who had stumbled upon a phenomenon so bizarre and unsettling that it sent chills down the spines of all who read it. Whispers of an alternative reality, one that appeared real but harbored a lurking sense of unease, grew louder with each retelling. This was the story of a man who found himself clipping through reality, forever trapped in a liminal space that defied explanation. The protagonist of our tale was a young man named Mark. He was an avid explorer of the unknown, always searching for hidden gems in the vast expanse of the internet. Late one night, while delving into the depths of a forgotten forum, he stumbled upon a thread that promised to reveal a secret doorway to another realm. Intrigued and fueled by curiosity, Mark followed the instructions meticulously. The thread spoke of a forgotten ritual, a sequence of actions that, if performed correctly, would grant access to an alternate reality. Without hesitation, Mark gathered the necessary items: a mirror, a candle, and an old photograph. He stood before a cracked mirror in his dimly lit room, the flickering candle casting eerie shadows across the walls. As Mark recited the incantation, a chill descended upon the room. The mirror trembled, its surface rippling like disturbed water. In a heartbeat, Mark found himself thrust into a realm that seemed almost identical to his own. Everything appeared normal at first glance, but there was an indescribable sensation that lingered in the air, a subtle, unsettling distortion. As Mark explored this new world, he noticed peculiar details. The colors seemed muted, as if a film of gray had been cast over everything. The people he encountered were eerily similar to those in his own reality, but they wore expressions that teetered on the edge of sanity. Conversations were filled with half-formed sentences, as though thoughts were constantly being snatched away by an unseen force. Days turned into weeks, and still Mark wandered through this uncanny landscape. He discovered dilapidated buildings standing on the edge of collapse, their windows shattered and their interiors frozen in a state of abandonment. Streets stretched out into infinity, never leading to a destination, and there was a perpetual twilight that cloaked the world, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for him. Though Mark was surrounded by a bustling crowd, a profound loneliness gnawed at his soul. Every interaction left him feeling hollow, as if the very essence of humanity had been drained from this distorted reality. The smiles he saw were painted onto faces that only knew anguish, and laughter echoed with a haunting emptiness. Time lost meaning as Mark's desperation grew. He longed to return to his own reality, to escape this prison of a twisted familiarity. He retraced his steps, searching for the elusive portal that he had entered through, but it had vanished without a trace. Panic gripped him, and with each passing day his sanity eroded. As the weeks turned into months, Mark's physical form withered away. His body grew frail, his eyes sunken and haunted. He became a mere specter, eternally trapped in this liminal space that defied logic and comprehension. And in the depths of his despair, Mark realized that this alternative reality, this twisted mirror image of the world, was going to be his final resting place. In the end, Mark's existence faded away like a whisper in the wind, leaving behind nothing but a vacant shell. His story remained as a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked within the hidden corners of the internet, a cautionary tale for those who sought to explore the boundaries of reality. Once upon a time, there was a young man named Ethan. He was an avid user of an online forum known as the Dark Web Chronicles, a place where users shared strange and macabre stories. One fateful night, Ethan stumbled upon a post called The Whispering Seed, accompanied by a warning from the forum's moderators. Intrigued and enticed by the promise of a bone-chilling experience, Ethan decided to delve into the forbidden tale. The story began with a description of a mysterious object called the Seed of Whispers, a cursed artifact said to grant the one who possesses it with unimaginable power. However, these powers came at a gruesome price. Legend had it that the seed would grow inside the host, transforming them into a grotesque abomination. Intrigued by the terrifying prospect, Ethan dismissed it as mere fiction, believing it to be an elaborate hoax. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. A faint whisper echoed through the empty room, causing a chill to run down his spine. Unbeknownst to Ethan, the seed had found its way into his life. Days turned into weeks and Ethan's world started to crumble. He developed an insatiable hunger that could never be satisfied. His body weakened, his skin paled, and his once vibrant eyes became lifeless. Panic set in as he discovered small abnormal growths protruding from his skin. They were like twisted, thorny vines slowly creeping across his body. Ethan sought help from the doctors, but they were as clueless as he was. The growth spread relentlessly, turning his body into a grotesque canvas of agony. Each passing day brought with it new horrors as the seed began to take over, controlling his every thought and movement. It whispered dark secrets into his mind, manipulating him into doing unspeakable acts. Desperate for answers, Ethan returned to the Dark Web Chronicles, hoping to find someone who had experienced a similar fate. He discovered a comment from a user named Sebastian Darkness, who claimed to have survived the horrifying ordeal. Sebastian revealed that the only way to rid oneself of the seed was to find its place of origin and destroy it. Guided by the cryptic instructions left by Sebastian, Ethan embarked on a treacherous journey to a long-forgotten forest. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, and the branches of the trees seemed to reach out for him. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the whispers grew louder, filling his mind with maddening thoughts. Finally, Ethan stumbled upon an ancient, decrepit tree. Its bark was twisted and gnarled as if it had absorbed centuries of malevolence. He knew this was the place he had been searching for, the birthplace of the seed. Summoning every ounce of strength left within him, Ethan pulled out a small rusty blade and plunged it deep into the tree's heart. As the blade made contact, an ear-piercing scream filled the air, reverberating through the forest. The ground shook violently, and the vines on Ethan's body thrashed wildly. With each strike against the cursed tree, the seed fought back, desperate to survive. Finally, with one last blow, the tree split into two, its life force severed. The forest fell silent, and Ethan collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The growths on his body began to wither and fade away, leaving behind only scars of the nightmare he had endured. But as he lay there, weakened and battered, Ethan knew that the horrors that he had faced would forever haunt him. The seed may have been destroyed, but its whispers lingered in his mind, a constant reminder of the darkness he had embraced.